Okay, so this is the requisite table of stuff. This is some of the things that I'm going to go through, but I'm going to tell a little story about Horizon's journey to build a technology catalog. First thing you're going to see is we've got a bit of an intersection happening between, I get to try the laser, between LeanIX and ServiceNow, the infrastructure side and the EA side. There were 6 prior presentations. I think 8 of them had silo slides in them, but none of them used that particular tagline. And you actually have to sing the bottom half of that. I don't know if they have that in Germany, but it goes, na 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 na. So now you know I'm 4 years old. The message holds true. We're all here to bring people together in our companies. Each area is most comfortable working with its own space. And very often as an EA, if you go and visit that space, they shoo you away. They know what they're doing. They don't need your help. If you think about that in a smaller level, in IT, this is certainly something that we should be able to gain control of and help correct, help improve. So we built a technology catalog to highlight all of the things that are important to the business and how they're delivered. And guess what these things are? All the things that you find in LeanIX. We built this out, we focused on applications and then extended it. We introduced our business capabilities. We're going to talk today about technologies, and these things extend further and further into other areas that are important. We're moving data in. It's an ongoing story. So one of the things that we're trying to do at Horizon, or at least one of the things I'm trying to drive, is to have a reason for all of the technologies that we have. We have some 4,600 or so servers. We know what about 2/3 of them do, sort of, maybe, by asking people. What we're doing is we're looking for a way to have evidence drive the relationships, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. For integrations, we're looking for ties between business apps and data stores or business apps to business apps. And then in the middle, we threw in transport. So we deviated a little bit from the LeanIX model. They were nice enough to make some corrections, which they can do in the Pathfinder version. And of course, all the technology models that are in ServiceNow are going to be coming into the picture. A little bit more on modeling. We have 5 different application types. Sometimes I think of my job as the guy that answers the question on the top. Wait, no, that's not an application, that's a technology. Or, but wait, how could that be an application? We only use that in IT. So what we've done is we've thought of applications as essentially things that are adding some sort of value that people recognize as a collection of hardware and software that all do something together. From a CMDB perspective, you're at a much lower level. The LeanIX level is higher view. You get to see how things are communicating, how things are talking. You get to learn about how technologies are either a risk for the organization or they're adding value to the organization. ServiceNow side is very detail-oriented. They have a job to do. They have operations to run, services to provide. The data that we get from ServiceNow is sourced primarily from discovery tools. Some of it's historical, inherited from other legacy systems. And every once in a while, a human gets involved. We use FNMS, SCCM, we've got Nexpose in the mix, Splunk, and then the big one at the top, ServiceNow Discovery and Mapping. That's a lot of data. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to consume it. We've got about 4,500 or so, as I said, servers. When you start to think about all of the software that's running on those servers and how that's related to the servers and the applications and so forth, you get this bit of an explosion. So we worked with LeanIX to try and develop the use cases that would be used on the LeanIX side and how we could potentially better support the ServiceNow side as well. So I'll leave these up here for a second. Not going to go through them all. Some of these things we're doing today, and they're working well. Others we're just starting, and others we're considering. So what do you do when you mix two things together? You get emulsification. I had to look that up to make sure I was using it correctly, but it's...
That's mayonnaise.
Exactly. I am here to tell you today about mayonnaise. That's right. EA is the planning side of things. When EA does its planning, the IT operation management side gets business services to reference. We've got processes in place that if you're going to add capacity at Horizon, you have to attribute it to an application. Business service is the ITIL word. Application is the EA, TOGAF, LeanIX word. When IT operations management deploys, and Andre talked about this earlier, EA gets the benefit of learning about the technology models. When technology planning and governance selects various technologies for retirement or introduction into the organization, that information is pushed into the operations area. So that's a CTO organization group at Horizon. So they are planning, operations is responding. And then again, when operations is updating, EA gets the benefit of learning about all the versions, and then all of the out-of-the-box reports work so nicely in LeanIX. So Andre went through this, but I wanted to talk a little bit more because I don't know if anyone here is considering using Technopedia, but the way we implemented it, we have Technopedia being used in the ServiceNow side. We have business services that are assigned to servers, which have software instances, and a Flexera engine runs through those and assigns each of those based on the discovery patterns that it sees to product models. So we bring the applications over, normalize assigns product models to everything, and then the product models flow over into the LeanIX side. That's an important distinction in role. So the ServiceNow side is very detail-focused. What's coming over in the LeanIX side are the kinds of things that we're using. Specific enough that we can determine whether or not we have some changes that we need to make, risks that need to be addressed. And as you can see, there's a sort of a mirror effect. You've got models go to IT components, manufacturers go to suppliers, and model categories go to our tech stacks. I just want to take a minute and show you what this looks like actually in the tool. Does anybody know, rhetorical question, about how many items are in Technopedia? It's the largest encyclopedia of hardware and software in the world. That's a good answer. It's 1.7 is what we have. This is the product. This is not the product model table yet. Aha. Okay. This is a ServiceNow view. And the number is up there in the top. So naturally, we took all 1.7 million models and moved them straight into LeanIX. Of course, no, we didn't do that. Actually, that's part of the story of how Horizon got to where it is in the model. We spent a lot of time in 2016, I'm thinking, trying to figure out exactly how to use LeanIX, because the model itself is very flexible. When I first got my hands on it, I had my spreadsheet, and I took all the applications, I put them there. I took all the servers, and I put them there, and all the software, and I put them. That's a lot of stuff. And as it turns out, that wasn't the best model to use. Actually, we want to use just the product models that are relevant. So at Horizon, that amounts to about 7,000 or so product models that are assigned to configuration items in the CMDB. So when you take a product model and start using it, that relationship is a trigger. The data travels over into LeanIX and is visible. So ultimately, what Horizon will be doing is looking at new items in LeanIX, specifically technology, planning, and governance, and saying, oh, surprise, we seem to have started using this thing. And if they want to see where, they can hop over into ServiceNow to investigate that. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Tough moving the screen around. This is Horizon's implementation of LeanIX, and one of the things that you might note is there are a few fields you haven't seen there before. Again, taking advantage of the Pathfinder release, we began adding in some additional fields. And I apologize, Nancy, where'd you go? I couldn't remember. I'm terrible with names. When we started out our journey, all of those fields that we had were up at the top with tags. You think you have tags. We had such a block of stuff that nobody could understand it. I would go in there and I'd be like, oh yeah, we just gotta, yeah, it's here somewhere. Hold on, let me find it. Much better. We now have it organized in a fashion that makes sense. So one of the things that you'll notice in the integration is right here. So with that, and the magic of television, got my fingers crossed that my login is still valid. You can see what it looks like on the ServiceNow side. Okay. Technology. So let's go back to okay, the other half of the picture. We're assigning technologies to applications based on the data that's in the CMDB. This is an example of a product model that was transferred over from ServiceNow into LeanIX, and now what do you see on the right-hand side? But two integrations. I guess you probably can imagine what happens if I click on ServiceNow, but there's also a link to Technopedia. You can see when you click on it that it tells you that it's been already linked. Top item there. I'm relinking it apparently. All right. The other large benefit that you get is that you've got the application or business service. It's listed in here further down, tied to the technology. So that's all taking advantage of the fact that the servers are attributed to the applications in the CMDB, and the servers have software running on them. And it all ties together magically, and it solves that problem that we heard about earlier, where the data doesn't become stale. So the title of the slide might not be as positive as it could be. I gotta let you in on a little secret. We're most of the way done with our implementation. We're down to the final days. I was actually hoping to be standing up here telling you about the months of experience that we had, but there have been issues, typical issues, I think. Probably the biggest factor that we ran into in doing our implementation has to do with the data. So when we went to turn this on, we realized that a lot of humans were involved in the CMDB, and they entered some things, and if we press the on button, all of the human-entered stuff, which wasn't as good as the discovered items, were going to flow into LeanIX, and then we would have to delete them to get it cleaned up again. So we delayed everything until things got a little bit more stable. Very much looking forward to seeing this shortly. Like I said, maybe on the order of weeks. We've got very good support. And that was another thing too. It's sort of like when we first started working with the ServiceNow folks, there was a, no, really, you gotta trust me, it's gonna be good. You have to sort of sell it a little bit. So now I think we've gotten past that. People are seeing value. We've got data steward for the CMDB that's very much on board. Things are moving well. Oh, don't read that. That's legalese. You'll go blind. Okay, so I wasn't sure how my presentation was going. I assume I have plenty of time left. Yeah, a few hours will be done. I want to tell you about an application for all of this. I mean, the idea at a high level is to just take great big arms and try and get people to work together, build a bridge. What we're doing now is relating to a compliance effort at Horizon. We've heard about various of them today, GPDR or GRDP or whatever, European thing. We have HIPAA at Horizon. That came up earlier today as well. And one of the things that is important in HIPAA is that when you're exchanging data with another company, you have to reduce it to just the amount of data that they need to be able to do whatever it is they're going to do. That's surprisingly challenging. You've got to get involved in every interaction you have. What interactions do we have? Oh, well, that's a good question. That's exactly what we're going to be using LeanIX for next. And in fact, we're taking it further. We're actually looking at, as I said earlier, evidence that shows that the components that people say they're part of the app really are part of the app. So my team is doing an analysis of communications data using our discovery tools, ServiceNow Discovery. We're going to use another tool, LandCope. And we're going to have an evidence repository of how things are communicating and use that to drive a picture. And from that picture, any other communication outside of that picture is what would go into LeanIX, because that's inter-app communications. That's what EA is focused on. Let's see. Along the way, we're doing some other things for compliance. One of the things that we have to do is locate all those external communications, and in order to do that, we have to know about all of the companies that we're communicating with. So we've got tools that tell us about individual employees reaching out, other applications that are reaching out, anything that's leaving Horizon Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Very large list, going through that and saying, hey, this looks like an application. This looks like something that somebody's just logging into to do whatever, their banking. To support all that, we're building something in ServiceNow that's a little bit new to Horizon. I've been told that I'm changing the organization. Promotion in my future, I hope. The idea is simply that if you have an application, it doesn't have a life cycle that just sits in LeanIX and you put some dates in once in a while. There's actually care and feeding that goes on. So one of the things that we recognize is, and Horizon's a little bit more locked down than some organizations, the way to get an application into LeanIX is you put in a formal request for it and it gets reviewed and the data is curated and then we actually do the addition. We keep the fact sheet application locked down. So we're going to be building all of that piece, but then after it's up and running and developed, we have all of these other compliance issues that have to be addressed periodically. Every 6 months or so, the application owner has to attest that all this stuff is theirs. They know where HIPAA material is in it. They know what it's communicating with. So like any organization, we went through and created policies for all of this, and we said, yes, this is what the application owner is going to do. And then somebody said, how are they going to do that? And that's where EA came in. So we said, okay, well, we're going to build a process to support that, and we're going to generate pictures, communication diagrams, and so forth that can help the application owners out. You got to picture some of the folks that are doing this, they just got the job. I mean, hopefully they've got good documentation, but like any organization, the documentation can be disparate. You get different looking pictures based on who drew it, why they drew it. It's usually project-based, not a repository-based view, enterprise view. So we're hoping to build something that will make a little bit more sense to folks, and I'll show you what that is. And then finally, decommissioning. Does anybody have a really good sense for how well that's done? How many servers have you come across if you've ever been searching servers? That's what I do every day. And you find one and you ask the person that there's a name associated, and you ask them about it. Oh, we haven't used that for years. No, okay. We've been tracking it for years. We've been patching it for years. Okay. I'm not going to go into this too much, but I talked earlier, we deviated a little bit from LeanIX's view of an interface. We look at an interface as something that a system offers up for communication purposes. We look at an integration as the consumption of an interface. So you've got two things involved in an integration, perhaps one in an interface, and we modified things slightly. I must have touched the wrong button. Okay, so I touched on this a bit. We're also considering getting down into usage, a usage record being if you've got the exact same interface, but one party's using it one way and another's using it another way, and each one are subject to HIPAA requirements. Very detailed. This talks about patterns that we're using. So when you're doing modeling, and that's getting to the conclusion of this section, when you're doing modeling, you pick a level that your audience perspective is interested in. Again, LeanIX more on the high level, ServiceNow on the low level. Same thing for integrations. If you're trying to give work out to app devs and you're saying, listen, you've got to build this stuff, then really what you want to give them is something very specific, hop to hop. But if you want to get a good view of where the data came from and where it's going, that's more of an end-to-end view. But then you introduce enterprise service buses and now APIs and microservices. You don't want to model what's behind the API over and over again. So what Horizon is doing is we're adopting a hybrid approach. Model up to the API, all the back-end infrastructure that supports it, separate integration models for the consumers of that. And this is how we use LeanIX to do that. Source, transport, target. So we actually built a application reference to transport, which in the current model is technology. So technology is still there, but not as important. So why are we doing all this? So I said what we were looking to do is to take the picture drawing process and potentially make it a little bit more consistent. This is an experiment. We're starting off. We've got a POC. It looks very promising. I haven't shared it with everybody at Horizon, but as soon as they see this video, they'll learn all about it. We're picking canonical views of applications. So this one over here is a typical 3-tier application. The 2 lines are firewalls, so this is an internally facing application. The one in the middle, this is an externally facing application. You've got servers that are in the DMZ. And then over on the right, we've got one set up for doing our Amazon work. And as we get further into that one, that'll probably have more boxes in it as well. But we're looking to take the data in the CMDB and assign it out to each of these boxes. So a completed picture has a list of web servers in here. Load balance. Web servers, app servers, database servers, everything is filled in. So this is a view that can be consistent, and we're looking for a tool. We'll press a button and it'll draw this picture based on the data that the discovery team found when they were looking at evidence of communication happening. So this is a joining of architecture and operations, because all of that operations data is what's feeding this view. Okay, for $5, I will send you this slide. This is the ER diagram for LeanIX. Okay, so I want to get back to a little bit on how we're developing out LeanIX. One of the things that we're trying to do to finish the deployment, to get to accelerated value with LeanIX, is to ensure that we've got good ownership of the data items. As I said, Horizon's view on access to applications is a little bit restrictive, fairly conservative. We don't give open read and write access to anybody that comes along. I want to try to evolve that and get more buy-in, and I think the way that will become successful is by getting different areas to own different data objects, fact sheet types. So these are the groups targeted to own those particular items. Hopefully we'll be able to open it up for more mass updates, and these areas will be responsible. I kind of feel like I jumped around in a number of different topics, so this should be an excellent opportunity for people to think of questions. Thank you all for your time.